Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Blues Talk. Jason can't be with us this week. He's helping Bill Roach with his inquiries. Joining us in Jason's stead is our regular Jim and John for his debut performance on Blues Talk. So we'll get into it, lads. Good win at the weekend against a team that's been a bogey team for us. A good win over Ospreys.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was great. It's great to finally get the first win. Haven't beaten them in the last 5 games, and it's strange how the game started off very well. We have this thing with Leinster these days, where we get a great start, and then we kind of go, let's let them into it again, as we saw against Zebre, and they kind of came back into it. But then we slowly pulled away. It was still a nervy game until even 5 minutes from the end, until we, I suppose that last penalty from Johnny, and then obviously Keano's try, kind of sealed it off. But overall, though, it was just the main thing was get the win. Sealed the home semi-final, and that was the main thing.
Yeah, well, I was very happy to see. Always good to see a prop score a try, but sealed the win. Cian Healy. And he was running directly away from me when I could just see this swashbuckling legs kicking up.
Yeah, he was, the high kicks were yeah.
And but as you say, Ospreys were in the game for a long time. I think really the third try was the thing that started moving us away from them. But they're a very, very difficult team to shake off.
They never give up, and they're annoying. I mean, there was actually a shout from the terrace at one stage. Ospreys, will you just ever lose? It's you see, even with the third try, even though that gave us a bit of distance, and normally we would start to pull away, but we didn't. And at times maybe, especially in the first half, we were maybe a little bit guilty of overplaying the ball. I think we tried to run out of our own half a few too many times. One good thing that I did see this year, as showed that we're actually learning, is there was an awful lot of kicking, attacking kicking, and actually it was responsible for 3 to 4 tries. But overall, especially the team that was picked, I mean, it wasn't the strongest team. There was a good few guys rested, and obviously we had the last minute introduction of Luke McGrath, which was revealed to us when Isaac Boss was walking through the ground having an ice cream beforehand. So but he went very, very well, and as we'll see in the second try, and overall you just have to be very, very happy with it.
Yeah, McGrath played very well, and we've seen him and John Cooney a fair bit. Was more John Cooney. We've seen him a fair bit this season. What with Owen Redden been injured, I mean, for a position that we haven't traditionally developed players in, it's becoming a position of strength, certainly with those two guys.
Absolutely, with Boss and Redden, their contracts finishing after next season, so those two guys look like they're. I mean, McGrath especially. He just comes out of nowhere, and he didn't do anything that was ultra spectacular, but he did everything so effortlessly, and he was in the right place. There was no fuss about him. He took everything in his stride, and he's tough.
Yeah,
that's the one thing about him. He is a tough kid, and I think, in fairness, I think Joe Schmidt kind of made it, didn't come as Joe Schmidt is wont to do. He didn't give him a carte blanche, because I think early on he made a ball and all tackle and helped a turnover, and then he probably tried to do it a few too many times, especially against Alan Wynne Jones, and I think at one stage William Jones just picked him up but overall, no, I thought he was excellent. He was very level-headed, he wasn't fussed. The breakdowns are always tough against the Ospreys, especially with Tupurik there and all that, and there was some issues there, but he just didn't react. He just didn't get fussed. He just kept playing his game, Because I just assumed Cooney would have started, and
I thought Cooney had started until about 5 minutes into the game.
Well, there you go. But I think it would have been a natural assumption that Cooney would have started and McGrath would have come on the bench. But it was a big call in a big game. Normally, for a first start, I mean, he'd only made 3 very brief substitute appearances, a couple of minutes at the end of fairly low profile games. So for an important game, that's a big vote of confidence from Joe, and I don't know, maybe it was almost a bit of Joe wanting to give him his first start.
Perhaps a bit of game time for the BNI final, wasn't it?
Possibly, yeah,
Giving him a good start in a big game like that, where it was very important, but it was also, there was a little bit of leeway there. It wasn't an actual knockout match. Effectively was.
That point about the BNI final is very valid, because I watched Newcastle play yesterday, and they ended up in a draw in their playoff in that ridiculous system they have in.
It was a draw, wasn't it?
Yeah, finished up. No, they lost. There was a last minute try. Sorry, I apologise. There was a last minute try, but Newcastle are a big team. I mean, they're a man-sized team. It'll be the first time that I think Luke has come up. So that game against Ospreys will serve him in good stead, I think.
They've got Ali Hogg, they've got your man McLeod in the second row.
Mhm.
Obviously Jimmy Goppert, who
Yeah.
he'll be looking to put a hit in on.
Yeah, that's very interesting actually. That they lost that game. Now, in fairness, was that the away leg?
Yeah, it was in
Yeah.
Carnegie Stadium. Yeah.
So you would think they would come back and should beat them in the other one. Having said that though, that might shift their focus away because I think their next game
It
is
will.
Thursday. Is it?
Sunday.
It's
Sunday.
Sunday.
Yeah, next game is Sunday afternoon.
Oh, sorry, it's Sunday. No, but
It's
when
a
they're playing the
Tuesday.
BNI final, they're
Yeah,
playing on
Tuesday
Tuesday,
afterwards.
and then they're playing the following Thursday, and they have
Yeah.
the BNI final in between. So I was thinking BNI was this week. It's next week, of course.
If they don't win
So-
by
More than
points,
7, yeah.
Yeah.
next week they won't be playing the following Tuesday.
Yeah,
as well.
which could swift.
No, but I think McGrath, it really is. I mean, and again, it's taking advantage of the situation with Boss. The thing with Boss, he can't play every game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. And if you tried to play him in that game, he might have been out then for the other games. He did hurt his knee. Look, apparently, he said he was never going to play, even though he was named in the team. But that's the bit of psychology there from Joe, where maybe he didn't want to put McGrath under the pressure of, because if McGrath had been named in the team, it would have been all talk about him. Whereas the last minute, there's no pressure.
Plus, Ospreys would have put an awful lot of work into a strong pillar defence with
Yeah.
Isaac Boss playing, because he is an extra flank forward, as they say. So anyway, we'll take a look at the tries now. Three of them were quite similar, and then we'll discuss what you were saying earlier about the amount of kicking.
Yeah. We can see. Is that Reese taking the ball up there?
And then McGrath looking very unfussed as usual.
Mm-hmm. Now, it was just a little dink ahead there from Fergo, had a good game, and poor Ross Jones,
Nutmegged.
who just had a bit of a nightmare. We'll see him again later. But good covering as well, and I actually thought Conway had a really good game, and in fairness to him, and I think it was pointed out online, he probably didn't beat a man with the ball all day, but it was his chasing. His chasing was superb, and as you say, a kick, like you can say, okay, he got a bit of luck with the ball going through. Poor
Still
Jones
had to be there and do all that.
Had to be there. Had to be putting him under pressure and get down. And a good bit of skill.
The harder he works, the luckier he gets. As
That's
they
the
say.
one. That's the one. So
Looking very relaxed, running it in as well.
Yeah.
He looks to have got over. I mean, he's had problems with various different strains and muscle strains and ligament strains and stuff like that. So he must be over those, because he's looking to be running very freely as well.
Yeah, no, he's looking very fit.
Yeah.
He's finally gotten fit, and this is well, we can talk about it later. But I mean, he's finally actually getting fit, getting a run of games, and he's off at the end of the season. But anyway, second one here. Now this is obviously McGrath's kind of standout moment.
Certainly was.
Nice, just poor effort from Alan Jones there, but
Brushed him
lovely
aside.
strength to take him on. Great confidence, from a young kid like that. And as you say, Sean O'Brien was saying afterwards in the Man of the Match interview that he's been badgering them, he's been looking, he's been dying to get in. You know what I mean? And obviously, he's had a stellar under-20s career, and that's not over yet, because he'll go to the World Cup probably as captain again, and that was it's terrific.
Talk
terrific.
about looking unfussed.
Yeah.
The guy took a pass, beat a lion who's about twice the size of him, bam, got a weak shoulder, and still managed to lean around and get the pass out.
Beautiful pass as
like
well.
composure. Yeah,
Good players always seem to have a lot of time, don't they?
exactly the
Yeah.
phrase I was going to use. He's just time on the ball.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, we see there we conceded 2 tries. Now, in fairness, I think they did get a bit of a rocket at half time, because they definitely came out with a bit more attitude. But again, this is
Kick.
just a nice little dink ahead. Again,
Speed of him.
in fairness, he actually it was just speed really more than anything. More than me. Okay, Jones probably could have done better, but he got up there and got the little kick ahead again. So
And in fairness to Conway there, I mean, John was talking about Luke McGrath showing composure. He showed very good composure there too.
Exactly.
excellent.
Not to snatch at the chance.
And he had time on the ball. It
Yeah.
looked-
Yeah.
If you look at just at the finisher, it looked, you could have stopped time there. He was just literally, what they do?
Yeah.
But there it is.
And
Don't
just
panic.
turned around.
Pick it
Yeah,
up.
absolutely,
Go.
absolutely. Turned
Yeah.
around. It was terrific, and it wasn't just the tries either. There was a couple of times he made really good chases, got tackles in. I remember one time Fussell, and we all know how dangerous he is, where he put in just a terrific tackle on him, got into his face, and and I felt it was and we'll see the last one again from Healy, and again it comes from a kick, and again Conway's involved. Although it actually initially looked like he knocked it on, but it was actually a very good call. In fairness from Owens, I think between himself and the touch judge, it was actually the Ospreys man who put it back. But again, it, at this stage, it was, we're talking about the kicking, and it was a reaction, I think, to last year. Like Johnny did this a few times, just these little almost like flop shots. And again, like you look at that, this is great. And
my hero.
He was getting the legs up there.
A prop scores a try is a good day.
Yeah, but he was so quick. A lot of people didn't know it was Healy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of people said, "Who's that?" And I said, "I think that's Healy."
He made a joke at the presser yesterday. They were talking about that John O'Gibbs was staying in place, and he was on press duty yesterday, and he was asked, "Well, is it very important for you that John O'Gibbs is staying in place?" He says, "It doesn't matter to me. I'm going to be at 12 next year."
Well, I tell you,
the scary thing is he could be.
He'll be fighting it out with Sean Cronin. In fairness to him, like
Him and Sean Cronin, in Bastero.
Props aren't supposed to run that fast. I'm sorry. If Jason were here, he'd be equally disgusted.
The first time,
He's a mutant.
The first time we ever seen this guy
In a good way.
was away to Glasgow, and he came on and scored a prop, and it was the same. He scored a try, sorry, and it was the same thing. It's just, who's that? Who's that on the wing? And it was the prop, like. But again, it all. But it all came from like we've seen it last year, even in the final, where I felt we knackered ourselves out trying to play through them too much. And the Ospreys, one thing about the Ospreys is they're always offside, they're always trying to get away with it, and they're big and they can tackle. Mm-hmm. And I felt that we almost knackered ourselves out, early on, and we very little in the tank. Whereas I felt like this year, one way they'll be to rush defence is by good kicking.
That leads into the question I was going to ask next, in terms of, we played the Ospreys God knows how many times. We found them very, very difficult to beat. We found them almost impossible to get through.
Yeah.
We've never been able to go through them. So this time Joe obviously decided, especially with the absence of Shane Williams, who's not available, who's retired now, to try and go over them, and because they didn't have that pace on the turn.
Yeah, and also, in fairness, like, not just Williams retired, they didn't have their two, but, didn't have what's his name, Eli Walker, Hanno Dirksen. So they had Haberfield, who I think is converted scrum half. He went into scrum half and they got injured, and Ross Jones, who was fairness, he was actually Leinster under 18s, and he's still only a young guy. Like, so they very much targeted it, and it paid off.
I think that hurt them, Haberfield having to go into scrum half. It would have changed their whole game.
Well, Fatah Ali was, that's brilliant pronunciation there again.
Fatah Ali
was a massive loss to him as well.
Well, one thing that was very good to see was the performance of our props. Jamie Hagan, who's leaving, Jack McGrath, who looks like a real prospect for the future.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Without our first choice front row, you might be a little bit, concerned, especially up against, the Jones, the Hair Bears. But Hagan had another really, really solid game in the scrum, and Jack McGrath was excellent again. He gave Adam Jones a really hard time, and by the end of it, Adam Jones looked bloody knackered going off the pitch. Like, he was constantly after him, showed him no respect. He's really, really become a strong player for us, and I think he's going to be a major player. In conjunction with Healy, obviously in that loose head position.
Well, Adam Jones is the presumptive starter for the Lions, and he was forced almost from the get-go to scrummage in a defensive manner because Jack McGrath went from the start of the match.
I turned around to the person next to me and said, watch this, first scrum, Lions tight head, Jack McGrath. Oh my God, Jack McGrath's after tearing into him. What happened? And he proceeded to tear into him at every scrum. He didn't necessarily, he didn't wipe the floor with him or anything, but
no, there was a few
holding up against.
It was a good battle. It was a good battle. He won a few, and Jones won a few, and there was a few times when Jones, I think, was trying it on a bit. There was a few collapses and things like that, So
that's some achievement.
Well, it's even putting him
under
under pressure.
Had to cheat.
Yeah, well, normally it's the other way around. Like, Jones would be putting pressure on him. Like, so no, he's been a major player in the second half of the season for us. Obviously, initially in the season, he was captain of the A team. And a big part of that early kind of success. But since Heike's been injured, as I've said here before, and I know I'm repeating myself, but we haven't missed him because McGrath's been so strong, and we all know how good a player Heike is, and yet really in the real terms, we haven't actually missed him that much, and it's a really great prospect. Ireland, we can never get enough props. I know you can say we've got Cian Healy and we've got Dave Kilcoyne. But guys get injured, guys lose form. You want as many options as you can get, and Jack McGrath is really putting himself up there now.
Well, we have McGrath, and just behind him is Jack O'Connell, and then on the other side we've Martin Moore and Tyg Furlong. So we seem to be well served for a province that hasn't always been historically. Well, it has historically been the strong scrummaging province, but there's been a gap of about 15-20 years when we haven't produced a lot of top.
A bit of a gap then.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we had probably Reggie and Emmett Byrne really were really the only homegrown ones. There was other people from England, there was people from obviously South Africa and things like that, and some were successful, some weren't. But it's I think there's been a concerted effort to get them in.
Absolutely.
Tyg Furlong, so Wexford lad, and he's brought in, and listen, Jamie Haig is leaving, and in a way it's kind of sad because like he's finally kind of hitting a bit of consistency, but at the same time, like, would he have been taken over anyway? So maybe he took that attitude that maybe I'll go to England. Who knows? He could be back in a few years' time.
Well, one thing that struck me, and it's the final thing we'll say on this game before we move on to the next round, as it were. The one thing that struck me was Madigan, the last kick of the match, which was the kick that won him the Golden Boot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not much of a thing, but it's kind of, in a way, symbolic of the preparation that goes into the team and how clued in they are on the pitch as to where they are, not only within terms of the game, but in terms of the bigger picture.
Well, in terms of the big picture, you can be damn sure he wouldn't have got that opportunity if there was any, if it was a kick for the game or if it was a really, but because we had the thing won and it was right in front of the post, there was no question. And I'm not trying to say that he wouldn't have got it had it been a difficult kick, but you wouldn't have taken the chance.
Yeah, well, it is nice recognition, and I suppose it's a tip of the hat from Johnny as well to say, best kicker in the league. His stats have actually been great now, and I almost think since Johnny's come back, Johnny kicking wise, Johnny had by his standards a kind of an average enough season. He was down around the 75% mark, which isn't terrible by any means. But he'd been up around closer to 80, 85, 90, in the previous seasons. So I think he almost kind of, since he's come back, I think he's only missed one kick or something, maybe two in the games. And I thought his kicking last week was absolutely superb.
Does that vindicate Joe's choice last year to not let Madigan kick, to let him learn everything else without the burden of kicking? Then he comes in this year, kicks the leather off the ball. Absolutely.
I think maybe it might have increased his hunger to work hard at his kicking, perhaps.
Possibly, yeah. I saw him play for the A's a good few times where his kicking was a bit kind of like Noel Reid, good days, bad days. You know what I mean? And you wouldn't totally trust him. Maybe that was the thing. In fairness, I think Joe's primary thing is to win games, and he knew he had Fergus McFadden, who at one stage last season, I think, kicked something like 20 or 25 kicks in a row or something. He had Issa, who was a very high percentage kicker as well. So his first thing was to win games. But even towards the back end of last season, Madigan was trusted a couple of times with the kicks and actually did quite well. So no, this year he's been given his head, and it's a phenomenal rate. And it's funny, he could have nearly lost it to a fella who only took 23 kicks in Lee Halfpenny, which would have been an absolute joke. Really, when you think about it, considering he'd taken 3 times as many and had the same percentages, but apparently they were dead even on their actual percentages. But because he'd taken the higher number of kicks, he got the Golden Boot, and it's good recognition. It's another little bit of fill up for the guy.
Well, that game was the end of the regular season, so we'll move on to the knockouts now, and we have a semi-final on Saturday against Glasgow Warriors. Possibly the most improved team of the season in the Pro 12. Did the double over them this season, but neither game was particularly either A, exciting, or B, a convincing win.
I would have thought, in fairness, I thought the second game was a pretty exciting game. I'd say it was exciting enough for neutrals. We just didn't play that well in it, and we were lucky enough, I felt, to get away with the win, because 60 minutes of that match I didn't think we played well at all. Yeah, first game was a bit of a horror show, 6-0 up in the lashings of rain. It's just one of those games where you play the conditions, and we were happy enough to get a win because at the time we weren't going that well. So but I wouldn't take a huge amount out of either win, funnily enough, as a kind of a given going into the game. In a strange way, I think Glasgow probably learned more from, especially that defeat where they really should have beaten us. They had us in a very good position to beat us. Maybe made a few tackle errors, took off their key man. You know what I mean? So we'll see if they've learned from it.
One thing I'll say about that win, well, apart from the fact that Ian Madigan scored every single point in both games.
Yeah.
One thing I'd say about it was they were missing their 2 lines, Hogg and Maitland. We were missing 6 lines plus Mike Ross. So if that gives you
Yeah.
idea of
Yeah,
the
it's a fair
relative
point.
strengths
Yeah.
of the two teams. You know.
Well, you mentioned Hogg and Maitland. Obviously, they've two lines. They've Al Kellogg, who was named captain of the Rabbit Direct Dream Team. They've DTH Van der Merwe, who I think is a superb player, and they've Matawalu, who scored very highly in the Player of the Year award this year.
Well, he certainly has been their player of the year. I think he's been sensational, and he really did transform. I mean, he didn't come in with any big reputation. He didn't. It wasn't like he was recruited from Super Rugby. I think he was recruited more off the sevens scene. Very unconventional scrum half in the sense that he's almost an Irish scrum half, and that he can't pass the ball. But
He's a bit quicker than most Irish scrum halves.
But he's sensational because he's not just quick, he's very, very strong. So he will take on the fringe defences. He's absolutely no fear of doing it. And even though he's going to do it, it still doesn't mean it's easy to stop. And we've seen it in the games, even against the Ospreys, even against Connacht, where he makes these little breaks and he's so quick he can go through and then bring runners onto it. It hurt us even in the RDS.
Absolutely, he's a super player. Maybe not a super scrum half, but he does play on the wing as well. So, but one thing I'll say about him is, I'd say we have his number at this stage. I mean, it's the end of the season. We've seen all his flash moves. We'll be prepared for him.
Well, again, let's see.
I know
because,
that he can still. I'm not saying he can't get through. I'm just saying we'll be well up for him. And there's a few back rowers there, depending on who's selected, that will be loving to hop him out of it. And strong and all as he is.
Yeah, no, that's true. And there'll definitely be the needle to this game anyway, because I seem to remember at the end of the win in that game, they had a pass judge forward at the end.
Yeah.
And,
Controversial.
And there was a decent bit of afters there between, I think, Barkley and Dominic Ryan and Kellogg and all that.
Kellogg, I think, is a bit of a psycho.
He's a bit of a mout, isn't he? He give Alan Wynne Jones a run for his money, but
I think that's genetic for locks.
Yeah.
And the best ones tend to be the most niggliest, annoying ones.
Yeah. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, no, I think they do. As you say, it isn't just about the scrum half, and it isn't just about Kellogg. They have a lot of good players. They've good scrum. They're always good at the back row. In terms of breakdown work, with like Barkley there, Harley. They're a good team, and they've got even the loose head Ryan Grant, who could have made a call, could have got on the lines, to be honest. So. It's going to be a hell of a test, and it's like you have to remember as well. We played them in the semi-final last year too, and they weren't as good last year, but they still pushed us. You know what I mean? 19-15.
That's the thing about them, though. You just said they're a good team, and that's exactly what they are. They're a team. They're not just a group of players who show up and they work hard for each other, but also they work well together. They're one of these.
Gregor Townsend, in fairness, has done
a
surprising job. Coach of the year.
I would. Yeah, he was coach of the year, and he's a guy. I thought he was, a guy who was put in the job because of his name rather than. But he's turned them into a very, very good team, and as you
they're
say,
good
they
to
are
watch.
a team.
And
Yeah,
they're good to watch. They play good rugby. I mean, when they get going, I mean they went through a run there just before we played them where they won 5 games in a row, getting bonus point in every single game. You know what I mean? It's just, and good. And again, they put 5 tries on the Ospreys as well. You know what I mean? And the Ospreys, that pretty much killed them, really. So
for a neutral observer, I would say it doesn't matter whether us or Glasgow win this game. It's the final will be a cracking event with Ulster versus either Leinster or Glasgow.
They played
a fair compliment to Glasgow. I'm a Leinster fan.
Just in terms of tying up our Rabbit Direct Pro 12 business, you said about whoever Ulster play. Ulster, of course, had to play Clonettley, who had what can only be described as a huge humiliation against Treviso. They were booed off the pitch, and Simon Easterby was in all the Welsh media basically apologising for his team and the performance.
He did apologise.
Yeah.
It wasn't he literally came out and said, I want to apologise for this. It was a disgraceful performance to capitulate like that in such a big game. I mean, they knew what they had to do. They had to go out and win. And to lose, but not just to lose, but to get. I mean, fair, we're not taking that away from Treviso. We've said repeatedly have improved throughout the season. But to put 41 points or something in it. I mean,
and the Scarlets got a try in the last minute.
Yeah,
which it was 41-12.
Yeah.
Well, would that have a knock-on effect on Ulster?
Make them too confident, you mean?
Well, it might make Ulster overconfident, and it would also stiffen the Scarlets in terms of they owe their fans one after last week.
They do, but I
think doesn't have the belly to come back against Treviso are not going to have the belly against Afoa and the
I don't think it's going to make any difference. I think Ulster are going to beat them and beat them handy. I think again you could argue the psychological thing. Maybe if it was in the Scarlet, maybe it was in Parky Scarlets, but it isn't. It's in Ravenhill. They might. You'd hope for their sake. You'd hope for Simon East to be safe. They come out and give it an out lash at least.
As a Scarlets fan said to me the other day, he said that this game can go two ways. Either Ulster can win, or Ulster can win really big.
yeah.
Well, there has been some good news for Ulster in the last couple of days. Obviously, Nick Williams got voted Player of the Year. And Jared Payne has signed a 3-year extension to his contract. Yeah. Two players who arrived at Ulster with very different expectations and very different reputations, but both have gone on to become vital to the Ulster cause.
Yeah, if I'm honest, I don't know if I would have given Williams. I think Williams has done really, really well for them.
Well, he was the Players' Player of the Year, so it's his fellow players who voted for him.
Yeah, but I don't know if I would have. I think that's a lot in his early season form. He kind of since he's come back, he hasn't been quite as prominent in games. If I'm honest with you, he's still been good, but I mean, he was phenomenal early in the season. If I was voting for Ulster's Player of the Season, I'd probably vote for Jared Payne myself. But anyway, that's my boy. No, it's. I mean, Jared Payne, obviously got injured first season, was a write-off. This season, certainly again, first half of the season, until he started getting these groin problems, absolutely superb. He's a joy to watch.
A lot of pace. If you look at him compared to when he was in New Zealand, he seems to be in slow motion a bit, but he can still beat people.
He can still beat people. I think Jared Payne is actually a lot quicker than he looks. I think he's one of those guys. He reminds me an awful lot of Andre Joubert. Who just seems to glide.
Yeah, he does glide.
I mean, it doesn't matter how fast he's going or how slow he's going. He always just looks to be, just gliding along. He's like a swan,
Yeah.
So that's Ulster now. So that's the Rabo Direct business. Next season's business is very interesting. Matt O'Connor was announced as Leinster coach for next season. He'll start with us on July the 1st.
Yeah, my cousin. Yeah, nice chap. Great to see him, keeping the family involved.
Nepotism.
I mean, he actually has a higher pedigree than either Michael Cheika or Joe Schmidt in terms of in terms of where they were when we hired them. I mean,
possibly, yeah. I mean, he's still
head coach at Tigers, which is still the number 2 role, but he's been head coach there.
Yeah, he's the number 2 though. Yeah. So I mean,
he coached at the Brumbies as well.
Coached at the Brumbies.
He was coach of Australia A.
At the same time, Joe had a fair amount of experience as well in New Zealand and things like that, Auckland and all that. Mm-hmm. So you could make an argument they could have a Mickey waving contest, as they say. No, I think it is very much along the lines of a Joe Schmidt. It is not a Michael Cheika one where Cheika was brought in to toughen the lads up, reorganise things badly needed, and did a superb job. I think this is more another technical coach, a guy who is going to actually coach. He isn't going to be sitting back. He's going to be in the middle of it. I think the message is, listen, there isn't too much broken with what we're doing. It's not like we want you to come in and rechange, do everything new. Having said that, we also want you to come in and give us new ideas. Bring new challenges to the players. Don't just say, "Oh well, that's all work. Go ahead." So I think it is a case of, he's not going to revolutionise things, but you hopefully bring different things to it. And hopefully we can just keep going, with the style of rugby that we play. It seems to, appeal to him anyway.
Well, he looks good. He looks good on paper. There's mixed messages coming from some of the Leicester fans, but
I'm not sure how much of that is true or how much of it is just internet talk either.
I think that the guy is probably, he's probably going to turn out well for us.
You never know, though.
You don't.
But that's one question. I mean, it's different being an actual head coach. Although his title at Tigers is head coach, but being the actual head coach, the number 1 guy, it's different than being number 2 under somebody, because he has to deal with everything. He has to deal with all the contracts, all this kind of stuff, all the stuff. He basically runs the professional side. Yeah. That's a different thing. So there might be an element there that we don't know about.
Well, to be fair, Guy Easterby kind of does that.
No, he does. He does take a lot
for Leinster. Yeah. So I mean, I think
Mick Dawson obviously does a lot of the contract stuff.
And Mick Dawson, and so I don't think he'd be need. No, obviously he'll be probably have the want to have the final kind of word on who stays, who goes, who we bring in. Which is fair enough. I'm sure Joe had that kind of influence as well. But just the day-to-day running of it, I think he is a like-for-like replacement in terms of he is a coach. He is a guy who wants to be on the field. He wants to be running moves. He wants to be doing this. Whereas Michael Cheika was a more a director of rugby type who was sitting back. Now it's interesting to see already the rest of the existing coaching team have all signed up for at least one more year. So you know he will have Richie Murphy there. He will have John O'Gibbs, and he will have Greg Feek.
Apparently, he insisted on that.
Well, that's great as well, because I mean there's a lot of solidity there, and he can come in and say, well, listen, you know, this is how I'm doing things, but it's a year. So if it turns out that, listen, you know, we don't want to work well together, fair enough, it's a year. You know what I mean? Like, but also you could have the situation where I know the likes of Richie Murphy could be in the Ireland, brought into the Ireland camp as well with Joe as well. So no, I mean it's positive, as you say with these things. No one, you know, I mean we've hit the jackpot 2 times in a row. What Michael Cheika achieved, Joe brought us even onto a new level. Now it's a hell of an act to follow for this guy, and you know he's gonna have to hit the ground running as well. You know, he's not going to have much of a bedding in period, but who knows? You know, I'm happy enough with it. You know, you say he doesn't have the head coach experience, but really, you know, a lot of guys who have head coach experience, a lot of them have, you know, experienced a failure. You know, so there isn't that many, you know, really, unless you want to get Guy Vez in.
It's actually like we said last week about the Ireland job.
Yeah.
The head coaches, the high profile, a lot of the guys who are available for a reason.
Yeah.
So you're kind of stuck with taking somebody out of a.
And there's also these guys that, you know, they're on every time there's a coaching vacancy.
John Kirwans and
there's there's Nick Mallet, there's
the Alan Kirbishleys of rugby.
There's Jake White who's contracted for several years. His name still comes up.
And I suppose and there's also, you know, this whole idea of you're giving a guy a chance, you're giving a guy the hunger. You're going to say to yourself, listen, and also you're giving him some nice toys to play with. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's a coach in the world that wouldn't look at that Leinster team, have a look at the academy, have a look at some of these things, and kind of go, Jesus, you know, I can do something with this. I'd want to be a bad coach to screw this up. Absolutely. You know what I mean? So I think that's in unfairness from what we've heard of O'Connor. Like, he's coming in going, it's a different story if you're taking on a team that you think is knackered, as jaded. You don't think there's talent coming through. Munster, I do. But
I think that that's a big thing for Joe Schmidt in the Ireland role, that he's taken them at a low ebb, and you know, with any decent coaching will bring them up from where they are now. You know, while we have,
because the talent is there in Ireland. I mean,
absolutely,
the Irish coach has talent available to him. I mean, much as I dislike Kidney, well, not dislike, but didn't appreciate his coaching ability. He was unfortunate for the last maybe year and a bit in terms of injuries.
Yeah, he was. But anyway, okay, Kidney's gone. The thing again, as you just bring it back to Joe's point, and you know, again, another thing that, you know, make the Ireland job thing is there is talent. You know, there is talent there if you can do it. So I mean, if Joe Schmidt doesn't succeed in the Ireland job, I don't think Joe Schmidt's going to be blaming anyone except Joe Schmidt. You know, and again, I would say very similar to Matt O'Connor. If Matt O'Connor doesn't succeed in Leinster, he'll probably be blaming himself too. So, you know, there is talent there. Now, at the same time, you have to have your bit of luck. You have to have guys staying fit, you know. And then there is contract situations as well. We don't know how that's going to play out. You know, if Johnny's a big success in France, will he be losing more players? Blah, blah, blah. That's all down the line. But just in terms of the overall, I think we're continuing with a kind of an existing thing whereby instead of just going for a name or a guy who's coached all over the place, you know, in terms of, you know, head coach jobs, we've kind of said, no, we're going to give this guy a chance. And hopefully, in 3 years' time, he'll have the profile that Joe Schmidt has. You know, so see what happens.
Well, from the perspective of Cheika being a tough guy who came in and took no crap off nobody, and you know, was very passionate about the team, and you know, you couldn't speak to him until at least Tuesday if we lost. Joe Schmidt came in and is, you know, such an affable, nice guy.
But with a bit of steel there too. With a bit of steel there too. Like,
here you go, guys. Here, do this and do that. You didn't do it.
Yeah.
You did. Good night.
I have a feeling Joe being quiet is quiet the same way the fat Tony in The Simpsons is quiet.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, anyway, what I was going to say was that Matt O'Connor seems to be a bit more on the abrasive side in terms, you know, he's a bit closer to Cheika than.
Well, he is Australian.
In nationality and in temperament. But sure, we'll see how that pans out.
Yeah,
over the year.
Well, anyway, folks, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the semi-final at the weekend. We're all hoping for a Leinster success. So we'll see you next week when Jason will hopefully be back in the hot seat. Good night.